Welcome to Twa Grannies. Today, Granny Morag will be reading To a Mouse, a Robert Burns story.
To a Mouse. Robert Burns, before he became a famous poet, tended a farm in the tranquil Scottish countryside. He was a man whose hands were as weathered as the land he loved. While his fields were full of crops, his home was full of books. Robert was not only a farmer, he was a thinker and a dreamer. On a crisp November morning, with the sun just peeking over the hills, Robert set out to plough his field. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of damp earth and the promise of a new day. He whistled a tune while happily getting to work. As Robert guided his plough through the soil, he revelled in the solitude, his mind wandering to the teachings of philosophers and poets who had pondered the mysteries of existence. Suddenly, the plough jolted, unearthing more than just soil. To Robert's surprise and dismay, he had disturbed a small, hidden nest, the winter refuge of a tiny mouse. The wee creature scampered out, its eyes wide with panic, its tiny heart pounding like a drum. "Och, wee timorous beastie," Robert muttered, watching the mouse's frantic movements. The sight struck a chord in his heart. He bent down, observing the remains of the tiny home he had unwittingly destroyed. "Oh, what's a panic's in thy breastie?" Robert felt a pang of guilt wash over him. In cultivating the land, he had inadvertently harmed one of its smallest inhabitants. He knew the mouse was just trying to survive, much like himself. With its small, crafty eyes and quivering whiskers, the mouse looked up at Robert for a moment before darting away under a hedge. In that brief encounter, Robert saw a reflection of life's fragility and unpredictability. Robert stood up, dusting his hands, his mind buzzing with thoughts. This unexpected meeting had upset him. He understood that to the mouse he was a terrifying giant, an unforeseen disaster, reshaping its world without notice. Robert continued his work, but now with a gentler touch and a watchful eye, mindful of the little lives that shared his beloved land. With its rolling hills, the Scottish countryside had offered him a lesson he would carry in his heart like a precious gem. As Robert resumed his work on the field, the image of the startled mouse lingered in his thoughts. The sun climbed higher, casting a warm glow over the land, but a sense of responsibility shadowed Robert's heart. He couldn't shake off the feelings that he, a man of the land, had somehow failed in his unspoken duty to protect all of its inhabitants. Pausing at work, Robert leaned on his plough, gazing at the disturbed earth where the mouse's nest once lay. He felt a deep connection to this tiny creature, a fellow mortal. With a solemn step, Robert approached the spot where the nest had been. He knelt, his rough hands gently touching the scattered ruins. Speaking softly, as if the mouse could still hear him, he began his heartfelt apology. "Ye wee coorin' beastie," he began, his voice tinged with a gentle Scottish burr. "I'm truly sorry for what I've done. Man's dominion has indeed broken nature's social union, and I, in my carelessness, have just added to it. Mankind has upset the fragile balance of nature with his progress, and Robert had contributed to that by destroying the mouse's home with his plough. "As your poor earth-born companion, I wish you no harm. You needna run away in such haste next time," Robert continued, hoping his words would somehow bridge the gap between his world and that of the mouse. "I doubt not. You might sometimes take a grain or two from my field," Robert said, smiling faintly. "What then? Poor little beastie, you must live. An odd ear in 24 sheaves is a small request. I'll get a blessing with what's left and never miss it." Robert understood that the survival of the mouse, taking what it needed from the vast bounty of nature, was a simple fact of life, not a moral failing. Robert stood up, his apology to the unseen mouse hanging in the air like a whispered prayer. He knew that his words were more for himself than for the mouse, a vow to be more mindful and more respectful of the small lives that shared his land. Feeling a subtle shift within him, he returned to his plough. He was no longer just a farmer working his land, but a guardian, a humble steward of a larger, interconnected world. In its simple, unassuming way, the mouse had taught him about coexistence and humility. Coexistence, as he needed to live without disrupting nature. Humility, as despite humanity's intelligence and capabilities, we are all still at the mercy of fate. Just like the mouse, we must accept things we cannot control. The incident with the mouse stayed with Robert. That evening, as he sat by the fire in his modest farmhouse, he took out an old, worn notebook and began to write. His words flowed into a poem of apology to a mouse. "But, mousie, thou art no thy lane, in proving foresight may be vain. The best laid schemes o' mice and men gang after gley." He wrote, his pen moving steadily. The poem spoke of the shared plight of the mouse and man, their plans often going awry, their futures uncertain. Robert's poem, To a Mouse, soon spread among his neighbours and beyond. It resonated with many, reminding them of the delicate balance of life and the unexpected turns it could take. The poor mouse's winter plans were ruined by an unexpected event, just as men's plans are often ruined by unexpected events, such as floods, fires, or earthquakes. As Robert had returned to the rhythms of his work, the tiny mouse, hidden in the dense hedgerow after escaping Robert's plough, faced a critical dilemma. The destruction of its home was not just inconvenient. It was a matter of survival, especially with the harsh Scottish winter fast approaching. Small and vulnerable, the mouse scurried through the undergrowth, its mind racing with fear and uncertainty. The world, once familiar and safe, now seemed vast and intimidating. The need for a new shelter was urgent, but where could such a place be found? The mouse paused in the cool shade of the bracken, its tiny heart pounding fiercely. During the summer, before the harvest, the fields had been full of warmth and security. Now the fields lay bare and exposed, and without material for it to reconstruct its home. The mouse knew it had to venture beyond its familiar territories and into the unknown. It began its search cautiously, moving through the thickets and over the damp soil. Every rustle of the leaves, every shadow cast by the passing clouds sent shivers down its spine. The mouse understood the rules of nature all too well, the constant dance between predator and prey. As the day faded into evening, the mouse explored potential sites for its new home. It carefully considered each option. An old hollow log, a cluster of dense foliage, a crevice between rocks, but each had its dangers. The threat of predators, the lack of food, the exposure to the elements. Meanwhile, unaware of the mouse's plight, Robert continued his work. His thoughts, however, remained with the wee creature. He wondered about its fate, hoping it would find refuge before the unforgiving cold set in. The mouse pressed on, driven by instinct and a will to survive. It knew that finding a new home was not just about shelter. It was about creating a sanctuary where it could live, gather food, and perhaps raise a new litter of pups. As the stars began to twinkle in the twilight sky, the mouse discovered a promising spot near the edge of the field. It was a small depression under a tuft of grass, sheltered from the wind and hidden from the prying eyes of predators. With renewed vigour, the mouse set to work, using its tiny paws to shape and craft its new abode. The mouse meticulously gathered blades of grass, bits of leaves, and small twigs to build a nest that would offer warmth and safety. The mouse worked tirelessly in the night's quiet under the watchful stars. Though tested by the day's events, its spirit was unbroken. In this small corner of the world, it found a glimmer of hope, a chance to start anew. And so, under the vast Scottish sky, both man and beast ended their day, each in their way, each with their worries, but connected by the invisible threads of life that wove through the land they both called home. As the new day dawned over the Scottish countryside, Robert, with his plough at rest, sat on a worn wooden stool outside his cottage, sipping a cup of strong tea. His mind, usually occupied with the day's chores, now wandered to the plight of the tiny mouse. In his contemplation, Robert recognised a profound truth. Just as the mouse was a part of the land, so was he. His life as a farmer was not just about tilling the soil and reaping the harvest. It was about being a custodian of the earth, living in harmony with all its inhabitants, and understanding the connections between all beings. Robert's contemplation was interrupted by a soft rustling in the grass. He saw the little mouse cautiously emerging from its new shelter, a small, unassuming burrow nearby. Their eyes met momentarily, and Robert felt a sense of connection. Robert liked to try to live in the present, not thinking too much about the past or the future. That's why he appreciated the beauty in the mouse's simple, immediate existence, its focus on the here and now. As he put it, "Wee mouse, still thou art blessed compared wi' me, the present only toucheth thee. But och, I backward cast my ee on prospects drear, and forward though I canna see, I guess and fear." Robert thought he better explain to the mouse what he meant. "You see, little mouse, as I watch you scurry around, living your life, it makes me think. You're pretty lucky in your own mousy way. You nibble on your cheese, play in the grass, and do all your mouse things without worrying about yesterday or tomorrow. The present moment, right now, is all you care about, and that seems pretty nice. Me? Well, I'm a bit different. I spend a lot of time thinking about things that have happened in the past, like mistakes I've made or fun times that are over. And then I also worry a lot about what's going to happen in the future. Will it rain? Will I be happy? Will I get a new plough? It's a lot to think about, and it can make me feel a bit sad and scared. But you, my tiny friend, you don't do any of that. You just live. If you find a tasty crumb, you're happy. You don't sit there and worry about where the next crumb is coming from, or miss the crumb you ate yesterday. You're just living in the moment, enjoying what's in front of you. When you're hungry, you just eat and relax, enjoying your food. When I'm hungry, I don't just eat. I eat and worry about paying my rent next week, and I regret the hurtful thing I said to Louise. I miss out on enjoying my food as my mind is elsewhere. And you know what? I think there's something really special about your way of living. It reminds me to try and enjoy the right now a bit more. Maybe I don't need to worry so much about what happened before or what's going to happen later. Maybe I can try to be a bit more like you, happy with what I have right now. So thank you, little mouse, for showing me that way of living. You might not realize it, but you're teaching me a pretty big lesson about how to be happy. While Robert went about his business, he looked for the little mouse, hoping it was safe and well. As the days shortened and the Scottish landscape began to don its wintry cloak, Robert observed the subtle changes around his farm. The trees had shed their leaves, revealing bare branches against the grey sky, and the once green fields turned to a palette of gold and browns. Winter was approaching, a time of hardship and endurance for all creatures, great and small. Robert, well versed in the ways of the land, knew the challenges ahead. The dropping temperatures and biting winds were signs of the tough times ahead. He busied himself with preparations, harvesting and storing the last of his crops, sheltering his animals, and fortifying his cottage against the elements. Meanwhile, the little mouse, now settled in its new abode, was also preparing for the harsh winter. It gathered food tirelessly, storing seeds and scraps in hidden caches within its new burrow. The mouse's instinct for survival drove it to work from dusk to dawn, aware that the coming months would offer little sustenance. In his daily rounds, Robert often paused by the spot where he knew the mouse's new home lay. "And bleak December's winds are coming, both bitter and keen," he muttered. Robert's thoughts often turned to the mouse as winter set in, blanketing the countryside in snow and ice. He hoped the small provisions he had scattered near the mouse's burrow would help it survive the long, cold months. In these small acts of kindness, Robert found a sense of fulfillment, a feeling that he was contributing, doing good by helping his tiny neighbour. The mouse, meanwhile, continued its daily routine, unaware of Robert's concern, but driven by the same instinct to endure and survive. Robert felt a deep sense of peace as he watched the snow fall gently outside his window. In the quiet of the Scottish winter, with the land asleep under a blanket of white, there was a beauty and harshness, a reminder of the cycle of seasons, life and survival that he, the mouse, and all living beings were part of. With winter firmly gripping the Scottish countryside, Robert's farm lay quiet under a thick blanket of snow. The once bustling fields were now serene and still, save for the occasional whisper of the cold wind. Inside his cosy cottage, Robert found more time for reflection, his thoughts often turning to the natural world outside his window and its inhabitants braving the winter. One chilly morning, as Robert scattered seeds for the birds, he noticed the tiny tracks of the mouse leading to and from its burrow. The sight filled him with a sense of happiness and companionship. Here was a fellow mortal sharing his land, struggles and joys. Robert realized their lives were intertwined, a coexistence requiring understanding and respect. He began leaving more small bits of food near the mouse's burrow, seeds, scraps from his table, anything that would help the little creature through the winter. It was a small gesture, but for Robert it symbolized a deeper commitment to living in harmony with all creatures. In its daily foraging, the mouse discovered these unexpected gifts. Though it could not know where they came from, it accepted them gratefully. The additional food helped greatly, easing the struggle for survival during the harsh winter months where little food was to be found. As winter wore on, Robert often caught glimpses of the mouse darting in and out of its burrow. Each sighting reminded him of the unspoken bond they shared. In these quiet winter days, Robert came to a deep understanding of coexistence. He learned that every act of kindness made a difference, no matter how small. He realized that by living in harmony with the mouse and other creatures, he was enriching his own life and contributing to the delicate balance of nature. As the winter slowly gave way to the first signs of spring, Robert looked forward to the new season with a sense of hope and renewal. And so, as the stars twinkled in the vast Scottish sky, the farm lay enveloped in peace, a peace born of understanding, respect, and a deep unspoken bond between a man and a mouse in the shared world they called home.